You are listening to PR Radio Station of America.
In the golden light of early morning, the foothills east of Los Angeles come alive with a sight that connects the present to the past. Wild burros moving slowly through the dust. Their silhouettes stand out against the rugged landscape, ears perked, tails swishing. These animals are not recent arrivals. They are direct descendants of the burros brought here during the California Gold Rush, used as pack animals to haul supplies for miners chasing dreams of fortune. Over time, many were abandoned or set free, and entire herds took root in the desert. Today, they remain as living echoes of that history. By law, these burros are protected under federal statute, but their real protection comes from the community that cherishes them. In Moreno Valley, residents call them mascots. Families stop their cars along rural roads just to watch them cross. Children press their faces to windows, pointing with delight. Firefighters praise them because they graze down dry grasses that could otherwise spark devastating wildfires. To locals, they are more than animals. They are helpers, neighbors, and part of the landscape itself. But living so close to people has its challenges. Burros occasionally block roads, wander into neighborhoods, or chew through gardens of roses and flowers. Some drivers risk accidents by pulling over to feed them. Despite these nuisances, most residents view them with affection, shrugging off the inconveniences as the price of sharing space with a piece of history. The herds are woven into daily life, reminders that wildness still survives at the edge of suburbia. These animals are incredibly hardy. A healthy burro can live 40 years or more, surviving heat, drought, and predators. Their hooves carry them across rocky hills, their strong teeth tear through desert brush, and their instincts keep them close to the herd for protection. For generations, they have endured everything nature could throw at them. Yet in recent years, the greatest danger has not been the desert, but people. Vehicles, trains, fencing, and cruelty have become threats that nature never prepared them for. In the summer of this year, something sinister began. Reports surfaced of burros found wandering with arrows sticking out of their bodies. Not accidents, not natural injuries, but deliberate attacks. At least half a dozen animals were struck in the span of a few months. Foals just learning to graze were hit. Adults that had lived peacefully for decades were injured. The community, once charmed by the sight of burros, now lived with unease. And then came one young burro, just 2 years old, who would change everything. She would be named Cupid, not for love, but for the cruel arrow that pierced her chest and nearly ended her life. It was a clear morning in Moreno Valley, the kind of day when the sun paints the hills gold and the burros wander lazily across the ridges. A small herd was grazing near a trail, their shapes moving slowly among dry grasses. At first, nothing seemed unusual. To hikers and residents, this was a normal sight, as ordinary as seeing pigeons in a city park. But as the herd shifted, one animal caught everyone's attention. She walked with hesitation, her head low, each step slower than the others. When the hikers looked closer, shock hit them. A blue arrow jutted out of the young burro's shoulder, piercing deep into her body. The sight was almost surreal, like something out of a nightmare. She tried to keep pace with the herd, but every breath rattled, and her legs trembled under her weight. She was only 2 years old, barely an adult, with decades of life ahead of her. Now she carried an arrow that had punctured her lung. The hikers immediately called animal services, their voices urgent as they described the situation. Within minutes, the story spread online and across phone lines. Another burro had been shot. Animal services and deputies from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department rushed to the scene. Approaching a wounded wild burro required care. She was scared, confused, and in pain. Any sudden movement could drive her deeper into the hills, making treatment impossible. Rescuers moved quietly, circling her slowly while keeping her herd nearby so she would not panic. The arrow swayed as she breathed, each movement a reminder of how close she was to collapsing. Volunteers named her Cupid on the spot, a bittersweet name inspired by the cruel weapon lodged in her chest. It was as if fate had mocked her, striking her with something associated with love but delivered with violence. Once the team managed to calm her, they carefully guided her into a trailer. Every step was dangerous. The wrong motion could drive the arrow deeper. People held their breath as she moved forward. Finally, With patience and soft voices, they secured her safely for transport. The trailer sped down dusty rural roads toward emergency veterinary care. Inside, the young Burro stood shaky but alive, her large brown eyes wide with fear. Rescuers sat nearby, whispering words of encouragement as if she could understand. For them, this was not just another case. This was personal. Each attack had felt like a wound to the community itself, and Cupid was the latest victim. By the time news of Cupid's condition reached local media, the valley was buzzing. Photos of the injured Burro spread across social media. People who normally scrolled past animal stories stopped to share and comment. Outrage built quickly. Who would do such a thing to a gentle animal that had never harmed anyone? Why had the attacks continued for months without the culprit being caught? For Moreno Valley, Cupid was no longer just one Burro among hundreds. She became the face of a crisis. And as she was rushed into surgery, her fight for survival became a symbol of the community's fight for justice. When Cupid arrived at the veterinary clinic, the team was already waiting. Word had gone out that another wild Burro had been attacked, and every second mattered. The arrow had penetrated deep into her right lung. With every labored breath, her life hung in the balance. Rescuers who had accompanied her stood silently outside the treatment room, some whispering prayers, others just holding back tears. This was not the first Burro they had seen injured in recent months, but each case cut just as deeply. Inside, veterinarians and technicians moved quickly, transforming the stable into an emergency theater. The arrow could not simply be pulled out. If handled incorrectly, it would tear through delicate tissue and end her life instantly. Instead, surgeons had to make precise incisions, steady their hands, and work under pressure to save an animal that did not understand why strangers were surrounding her. Cupid's eyes darted nervously, her body trembling as sedation took hold. Her breathing slowed, shallow but steady. Machines beeped softly, a fragile soundtrack of survival. The surgeons worked with calm precision. They traced the path of the arrow, carefully cutting away muscle and tissue to access the point lodged inside her chest. The arrowhead had nicked her lung, causing internal bleeding. With surgical tools and suction, they cleared the wound, stitched the puncture, and removed the weapon that had nearly ended her young life. The broadhead arrow, once glistening with cruelty, clattered onto a metal tray. It was evidence now, proof of the crime committed against her. The room fell quiet as the team monitored her vital signs. Would she recover from the trauma? Wild animals are unpredictable under anesthesia. Even if the surgery was a success, infection or stress could still claim her. For several hours, staff rotated in shifts, checking her heartbeat, watching her chest rise and fall, offering gentle words though she could not understand them. Outside, rescuers updated the public. Posts on social media showed Cupid lying bandaged, tubes surrounding her small body. Thousands of people shared the images, sending messages of love and anger. Donations increased, and promises to protect her and her herd poured in. By the next morning, hope arrived. Cupid struggled to her feet. Her legs wobbled, but she stood tall, ears flicking and nostrils flaring. For the people who had feared she would never rise again, the sight was overwhelming. Some cried openly. Others cheered. Cupid had taken her first steps as a survivor. News spread quickly. "She is stable and standing," announced Chad Cheatham of Donkeyland, his voice filled with cautious relief. For the community, this was more than a medical update. It was a symbol. Cupid was proof that cruelty could be met with resilience. She became a beacon for all the other Burros that had suffered, and her fight to live transformed into a rallying cry for justice. As word spread that Cupid had survived her surgery, relief quickly turned into outrage. The photos of the young Burro with a blue arrow in her chest struck a nerve. Residents who had grown up watching Burros graze along dusty hillsides were furious. On social media, posts flooded with anger, calling for justice and protection for the herds. How could anyone do this? People asked again and again. It was not just cruelty. It was an attack on an animal that symbolized the spirit of their valley. Donkeyland, the nonprofit rescue group now caring for Cupid, knew emotions were running high. Within days, they announced a $24,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. The money came from hundreds of donations, large and small, from people across California and even other states. The message was clear: This cruelty would not be ignored. The Riverside County Sheriff's Department confirmed they were investigating, treating the attacks as federal crimes since wild burros are legally protected. For the first time, it felt like the attackers might actually be caught. And Cupid's story had made that possible. The community of Moreno Valley began to mobilize. Volunteers offered to patrol rural roads at night, watching for suspicious activity. Local businesses put up posters with Cupid's photo, urging anyone with information to come forward. Schools taught children about the history of the burros, turning Cupid into a lesson in both kindness and resilience. Neighbors who once saw burros as nuisances blocking roads or chewing up gardens now defended them fiercely. "They're part of us," one resident told a reporter. "They belong here as much as we do." Cupid had transformed casual affection into deep loyalty. Firefighters, often seen as unlikely partners to the burros, added their voices too. They explained how the animals help control wildfire risk by grazing on tender dry grass in remote canyons where machinery could not reach. "These burros go where we cannot," one firefighter said. "They are our allies in keeping this valley safe." That simple truth reminded everyone that the burros were not just symbols. They had a role in the ecosystem and a value beyond nostalgia. Cupid's survival brought these stories to the surface, painting a picture of animals that served their community in unexpected ways. By the end of the week, Cupid was no longer just one wounded burro. She had become the face of a movement. News outlets across the country picked up her story, turning her image into a symbol of resilience. Reporters spoke of her as the burro that refused to die. Donations to Donkeyland surged, allowing the group to expand its care for other rescued animals. And in Moreno Valley, the mood shifted. Fear and anger were still present, but there was also pride. Pride that their community had rallied. Pride that they were protecting something fragile yet enduring. Cupid had survived, and in doing so, she had awakened a fierce determination to guard all the others that still roamed free. Weeks after surgery, Cupid's body began to heal. The wound in her shoulder, once raw and frightening, slowly closed under careful treatment. Her breathing grew steadier. She no longer stumbled with each step. Caretakers at Donkeyland checked on her daily, bringing hay, fresh water, and gentle words. At first, she was wary, unsure of the human hands that now guided her. But with time, she relaxed, ears flicking calmly as she accepted food and care. For the rescuers who had feared she would never stand again, every small sign of progress was a victory. When she was finally strong enough, the gates of Donkeyland's vast sanctuary opened. Cupid stepped out cautiously into open pasture, ears turning in every direction. Other rescued burros grazed nearby, their coats gleaming in the California sun. Slowly, she walked toward them, her scar visible but her steps confident. The herd accepted her, and she blended into their ranks, no longer a wounded victim but part of a family. Caretakers watched from a distance, tears in their eyes. To see her running with the others, her hooves kicking up dust, was proof that her ordeal had not broken her spirit. For Moreno Valley, Cupid's recovery was more than good news. It was a symbol. She had endured cruelty, survived against the odds, and returned to live freely again. Local children drew pictures of her for school projects. Community events featured her story as a reminder of why kindness matters. National outlets followed up with glowing reports, calling her the miracle burro. She was living proof that even when cruelty tries to destroy, compassion can rebuild. Cupid's survival reminded people that protecting the vulnerable is not just a duty, it is a shared act of humanity. Though Cupid thrived, the shadow of the attacks had not lifted completely. The investigation into the series of arrow shootings remained open. The $24,000 reward still stood, and authorities pressed for tips. The broadhead arrows used in the attacks were unmistakably meant for hunting, and officials knew that whoever had targeted the burros had acted deliberately. But Cupid's presence in the sanctuary shifted the narrative. Instead of despair, people carried determination. They wanted justice, but they also wanted to ensure that no burro would ever again endure what Cupid had survived. Today, Cupid roams Donkeyland's 2,000 acres with freedom, her scar a reminder, but not a burden. She grazes, plays, and rests among her herd, embodying the resilience of a species that has endured centuries in the American West. Her story lingers in the valley and beyond. To rescuers, she is a daily inspiration. To the community, she is a symbol of what they can achieve when they rally together. To the nation, she is proof that compassion can defeat cruelty. Cupid began as a victim. She became a survivor. And now, she stands as a living testament to the strength of the wild burros of California and the people who refuse to let them fade. This is the end of that story. Now tell me in the comments, what's your most unbelievable story? I'll read out the funniest ones in the next video. Do not forget to hit a like button and subscribe. See you.